say, great friend of mine, Col Goudie, editor of Rogue One, A Star Wars Story, joins us on the Podathon, raising money for Make-A-Wish Foundation. Col Goudie, great to see you. It's been a while. Thanks for
It
joining
has,
us.
David. Yeah, it's great to see you. Star Wars Celebration was the last time we got to hang out together.
Goodness me, we need to rectify that
This was a year
ASAP.
ago.
Now, your love of Star Wars goes right back to the original. I
Yeah,
remember you telling me a long time ago that when Star Wars came out, it came out in the US before the UK. So the UK, there were loads of clips on the television showing
yeah,
Star Wars. So the really exciting moment for you was seeing The Empire Strikes Back.
that's right.
That moment, and your love of Star Wars, as we can see by your fabulous outfit and the Star Wars paraphernalia behind you. It's part of your life. And
It very much is.
goodness me, the moment you get that call to work
Yes,
on a Star Wars movie, what was
yes.
that like?
Um, I had a text message from Gareth Edwards, who was the director of Rogue One, and I had previously worked with Gareth. We did a couple of projects together. We worked together on a BBC TV series called Space Race, which Gareth did the VFX for, and then he did his big directorial debut, which was a 1 hour drama for BBC television called Attila the Hun. So that's the first time I worked with Gareth as an editor, and he was my director. And then based on that, he asked me to go and do his first cinema feature film, which was a film called Monsters, which wasn't a horror film. It was a kind of a love story, really, which we shot in Central America. And I traveled around Central America with Gareth. We were in Mexico and Belize and Guatemala, and also Costa Rica and Texas, actually. And then on the basis of that, Gareth got his first Hollywood studio movie, which was Godzilla. And then he sent me his message and he said, what's the best way for somebody to get hold of you? And I said, send me a WhatsApp message on my laptop. And he said, can't they just phone you? And I said, no, I dropped my phone that you bought me in the bath. So it's in a bag of rice drying out right now. And
That's fantastic.
Gareth texted me and went, oh dear, I gave that number to somebody. He actually literally bought me a mobile phone because I didn't have one. And
Those are the
and I
days.
dropped it in the bath. And he said, I gave that number out. And I said, who did you give it to? And the message came through and it said Lucasfilm. And that was the moment my heart kind of went into little palpitations, and my 16-year-old self went, what's happening? And I just emojied back shocked face emoji about 100 times. And yeah, I then got a phone call from Lucasfilm on my landline. Actually, that's what happened. And I was, because I'd had surgery, so I was on crutches at the time. So I was trying to get to a phone, trying to not fall over and end up back in a hospital. And I was like, hi.
Yeah. Oh yes, I'd love to. I'd love to be involved. That's fantastic.
Yes.
So the
And then
mobile
they
phone
said,
that
can you
Gareth
come
bought
to,
you.
yes, can you come to Pinewood for an interview? And I went down to Pinewood Studios and I had an interview, and I think it was on my birthday, actually. And I thought, however this goes, if I get the job or not, I've had my birthday at Pinewood Studios.
Yeah, and what a birthday, and what a present as well, because
Yeah.
you then started working on this movie that has become.
Yes,
I mean, I think it's fair to say, Cole, that so many people love Rogue One. It's one of those
they
movies
do.
that yeah. Well, thank you. I mean, thank you and Gareth and all the team that put it together, because it really is a continuation of what feels like those original Star Wars movies. And when you were in our Star Wars documentary, The Galaxy Britain Built, in 2019, we talked about how that legacy had kind of progressed from the 70s to the current day, and that kind of
Right.
talent that still works on Star Wars movies.
We knew we had to build Yavin and the hangar for the Rebels, and we looked at different locations, and there was all these different ones. And then finally we went to this place in Cardington, and when we were stood there, someone said, by the way, do you know this is the exact spot C-3PO and R2-D2 and Princess Leia and Han Solo were stood for that shot, that exterior shot, like punctuation moment before the briefing of the attack on the Death Star. And it was like, well, then we're definitely filming it here, right? Like, why wouldn't you film it here? So we actually, in the very same space, created that hangar for real, and we could go in and it was probably the biggest set we built, and I'm sure it cost a lot of money.
That's not your problem.
No, they made a lot of money as well.
That's fine.
It made more than $1.5 billion off the back of a $200 million budget equaling the success of the original, which was made for a fraction of the price. Much of Rogue One's success has been attributed to the style of its British director.
Gareth, as a filmmaker, he likes to have actors run with the flow and do improv and change things. So Gareth will do a take and he will run that camera sometimes for up to an hour. He will say, and reset, and they will maybe run back to first positions, but sometimes he'll just carry on. And because he wants, what he wants from that is a moment of truth, he calls it. He's always looking for the moment of truth. And I think Kubrick would do it by doing 106 takes, you know, the kind of the legendary Kubrick method. Gareth says you do one take, but it lasts 106 minutes. And you have to go through it all and find that moment of truth.
But I think it's fair to say that most people you speak to who are Star Wars fans love Rogue One. I suppose when you started it, you would have had no clue how it was going to be received.
And when we started on that, episode 7 had not yet been released, because we started, when I went to Pinewood Studios for that interview, they were shooting episode 7. And when I was working, I first started working on the film in 2014, which was in the autumn of 2014. And I remember they showed us the very first teased trailer for Force Awakens in that huge cinema at the Presidio, and Kathy Kennedy introduced it, and it was rammed. Everybody from Lucasfilm and ILM, we were all watching that trailer together, and it felt like, wow, we are right in the center of this, what's coming with all these new films. And we didn't know if episode 7, Force Awakens, was even going to be a hit or not, you know, because it hadn't come out. Was there still an appetite for new Star Wars films? And it wasn't until, obviously, a year later, we were at Pinewood, we were shooting Rogue, which would have been the Christmas of 2015, when Force Awakens came out, and we were all invited to go and see a cast and crew screening of Force Awakens. And then obviously within a few days, it was the second biggest grossing movie of all time after Avatar. So then the pressure was really on. Because it was like, oh, that was a hit. We hope that Rogue One can also be a hit. And obviously it's worth saying that I was one of just 3 editors. There was Jabez Olsen and John Gilroy also worked on the film. I was on it for the longest. I was on it for 27 months. So I was on it right from the beginning until like the day the movie came out. And Jabez was on it like for a whole year, I think, during the whole shoot, and then into post. And then John Gilroy came on for the last 5 months, I think, 4 or 5 months, which is when we ended up back in, actually it was probably 6 months actually. We ended up back at the Skywalker Ranch, finishing the film off at Skywalker. So I was a tiny part in a very big wheel of cogs.
Yeah, but very modest of you. I knew you'd be like this. I knew you'd be modest, Col. But I know that, as you said, you spent the longest on it, 27 months. But I remember you saying to me in the past for the documentary, and we've had conversations since about those days in the edit suite. They were very, very, very long.
Some of them were. Yeah, some of them. I mean, just occasionally when you have to get things ready for screenings, and normally on a big Hollywood feature, what you would do is you would test screen a film to an audience, and then they fill out a little survey, and they're interviewed by a host in the cinema. What did you like this? Did you understand that? You can't do that with a Star Wars film. Those big movies, like probably the Avengers films as well, because you cannot risk the plots being leaked. So because of that, you only have screenings with the heads of the studio, people like Kathy Kennedy. So the day before those screenings was always crunch time, because you want to get the film looking as good as you possibly can before you show it to somebody like Kathy, so she sees it as close to what the finished film's going to be. So those days sometimes were 24-hour long days to get it ready for the screenings. Yeah.
Am I right in thinking that with the edit process, you were pretty much editing right up until the premiere?
You would be correct. We weren't editing right up until the premiere, but we were in post-production. I do remember grading the print for the premiere the day before the premiere. So things were quite
pretty tight. That's pretty
They
close.
were quite tight. But the premiere was about a week before the movie came out. So we then had that buffer. So we knew as long as we had a print, we could screen at the print, and that's quite often the case. I know. I think the last James Bond film, they screened it for the cast and crew premiere, and then I think they went back and tweaked it again afterwards. So that's not uncommon to drop extra shots. I know when Jabez did the Hobbit, the first Hobbit film, because Jabez cut all 3 of those movies. The first one, they were rendering the shot of Smaug at the end of the first Hobbit film. They rendered that shot out the morning of the premiere, and they dropped it into the print and ran it over to the cinema. So Jabez had been through it all before. I mean,
I'm used to this. This is
very
nothing.
calm, Jabez, very calm.
Can
So
I-
I just followed the lead of calmness.
And obviously with editing, it's not linear, and you can move things around. What was the very first scene that you worked on?
Oh, it was actually, weirdly, it was the start of the film, because we filmed in Iceland, which was the scenes of Krennic landing and walking across the black sand to the house with Galen and the shootout. So they filmed in Iceland, I think, for maybe 3 or 4 days, something like that. So they filmed all those scenes first, which are ironically the prologue of the movie. Then after that, it was all over the shop, because we filmed in most of the film was shot in Pinewood. There was a week's filming out in somewhere like what I think it was at Wadi Rum, where they filmed Lawrence of Arabia for the desert scenes, and then we filmed in somewhere off an island off the coast of India.
Was it the Maldives?
The Maldives.
Yeah.
That's what it was. I was trying to think it wasn't Mauritius, because that was another film I did afterwards, and I knew it wasn't that. Thank you. So filmed in the Maldives as well. That was again about these things. There were the location shoots were very, very short. They were a few days, 3 days here, 3 days there, that kind of thing. And then 90% of the film. So all the soldiers, the Marines, the rebels, running around in the shootout at the end against the stormtroopers. That's all Pinewood back lot. We had we had a Pinewood set, and we had a set out up in Bedfordshire, and then another one further out as well.
Yeah,
so they were all shot. It was all shot in England. I mean, all that sandy beach stuff, and then we had like a couple of pickups. A couple of not pickup, a few wide shot days in the Maldives with the stormtroopers walking through the sea and stuff.
Did you get to go to the Maldives?
I did not. I didn't get to go anywhere but Pinewood. I actually did go. I did go out to I went out to the Rebel base hangar, and I went out to when they were shooting the stuff with the Rebels versus the store. And it's great. You stand there, and then suddenly things blow up, and stuntmen on wires go flying everywhere. And it's always just every day you're on a film set like that, you're pinching yourself, thinking, how did I manage to get here from a little comprehensive school in Northamptonshire with my dream of working on.
Well, through hard work and talent, I can say that. I know you're too modest to say it, but you are incredibly talented. And it must be, as you say, when you're on the set. And I remember talking to Gareth for the Galaxy Britain Built, and I said to him, was it weird? And he said, no, it actually felt really normal. He said, because when you're a kid and you're growing up with Star Wars and you've got the toys and everything, he said, and so all of a sudden you're surrounded by your heroes, you're surrounded by stormtroopers and things that are very familiar to you. He said it actually felt really normal.
When you get to do Star Wars, everyone expects it to be like, oh my God, was it crazy? And you go, no, it was really kind of normal.
Yeah, it's like when you grow up and you realise Star Wars isn't real, and then you kind of go into the real world, then you've been transported back there.
Yeah.
And it feels
and
like this
only
is the world.
joking, the world's not really boring.
Yeah, it's actually really exciting.
Yeah, and you go, yay, I was right. And then it's like, and then it ends, and you go, oh no, actually it's boring again, isn't it?
But when it ends, so when that music, that score, the Star Wars music, and it says directed by Gareth Edwards, that must make you feel, well.
Yeah, it's weird. Like that Iris White, dun, 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 dun. Like I watched those credits probably more than any other film as a kid. And that's how it felt like the ultimate film ends, is goes dun, 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 dun. So I guess when that happened on the premiere, it was like, it did feel like, okay, I can die now. Do you know what I mean? Like whatever happens in the rest of my life now, I've done that. I can die. I'm
much older than Gareth, and therefore I was already at art school. But what was interesting, that the seismic change that has happened within that generation has been that when I was at art school and I had to get a coach to London to go and see Star Wars, and because it was only on at 2 cinemas in the UK, there were up until then, there were no toys. It was very hard, there was no toys for the films I loved as a child growing up, and it was Star Wars that brought that kind of merchandising, as you know, from the Toys documentary that you did as well. So Gareth grew up with the toys of Star Wars. I was supposedly an adult by the time that film came out, and I still bought the toys. I still have them. I bought that Yoda when Empire Strikes Back came out. So I've had that since 1980.
Can
my
I
pride
just
and
say
joy.
something as a friend of yours? You've never grown up, and I don't ever want you to, because you know, the fact that you have this sense of joy and fun. But I think as well, and I think a lot of what you bring and other people like yourself bring is that joy of film, the joy of you surround yourself. I know you do in your edit suites with your toys, with inspiration,
Yes.
with R2D2, your favorite.
And that's not just me. That's if you go to when you
Yeah.
go to ILM in San Francisco, Industrial Light and Magic, who did the effects for all the Star Wars films, all of the artists that work there. I mean, everybody, their offices, they all look like this. They have toys, they have merchandising everywhere. And some of it is branded things that have been put in the building because it's Lucasfilm, but a lot of it is people's own personal toys that they had growing up. So, and I think it breeds creativity, or it triggers something in your brain. I genuinely believe that. And I always try, when I'm working on a show, I try to theme it. So obviously Star Wars, that was a dream come true because I could just bring all my toys in and put them in the cutting room. But I did a show set in the Second World War. So I put around my edit suite posters that said things like "careless talk costs lives," "don't forget in your ration card," you know, "waste not one," you know, all those things to keep calm and keep calm. So because I think it gets you into it's like an actor. When an actor gets into character by wearing a costume, I think you can do that as well. Because as an editor, you're trying to put yourself in the head of the performers and the head of the director, and you're trying to embed yourself into the film. And I think, I mean, it's just me personally. I know other people would freak out at the amount of stuff I have up. They would like a feng shui, completely clean working environment. I've never been like that.
No, but I think, as you say, it's if you're a creative person, having that around you and surrounding yourself with whatever, you know, paraphernalia you need for you know, for the edit, it makes all the difference, doesn't it? And I think that's special.
Yes, and I mean, and also technically as well. I mean, I remember there's a practical point as well. I had one of those big AT-ATs that you could put the figures in, and Matt Alsop, who was the storyboard artist and the concept artist for Rogue One, would run into my edit suite. And he would say, "Cole, can I borrow your AT-AT?" And then he'd put it on a table and he would be drawing it from all different angles, because when he had the toy in front of him, he didn't have to remember what an AT-AT looked like. You know what I mean? So he found that very useful to get work out camera angles and present ideas to Gareth. And then I remember when we were doing the Battle of Scarif, it got very complicated as to who was where, you know, the Rebels, the Imperials, you know, Jin's team, that I actually used post-it notes and I put them all over my cutting room floor, and I made an island, the island with all the offshoots, and I put the characters everywhere, and then worked out, okay, they've got to be there to get from there to there, and then they've got to run from there, and then I could block it all out and start to intercut the scenes in such a way that it made more sense, because you're intercutting narrative. So it was just better to have that 3D. I mean, there are other ways of doing it using pre-visualization and things like that as well, but at the end of the day it usually comes back to a note on a post-it note.
That's fantastic. And so you're actually building the whole set, you know, with figures
in a really rough way. Just literally I was like putting out post and then trying to block it out. It was useful for me.
One of the most poignant scenes, I think, is when we know that it's over for Jyn and Cassian, and they can't make it off Scarif. And I know that you edited that scene, and it was filmed over 3 evenings, 3 sunsets, and you ended up putting them together.
It was, but then what was really interesting, so I ran that as one continuous scene, and that's the way it had been. And then when John Gilroy came in on board, John had a new idea. And then I remember Tony Gilroy, the writer who'd come on with all you know, the new scenes, and Tony ran into him and he said, "John is intercutting that scene on the beach with Vader." And I was like, "Oh," and he went, "It's going to work because John Finkley has put some music on it. He was the music editor. See what you think." And they ran it, and I was like, "Oh my god, that is beautiful." And that was John Gilroy's idea to do the intercut, and I have, ever since that day, I have stolen that idea. And now when I work on films, I literally look at them and think, can I intercut this? Because some scenes were intercut anyway. But I'm like, is there a scene that wasn't meant to be intercut that I can intercut that will increase the tension? And I I did a film last year called Tetris, and I had to cut 3 different scenes with somebody on a plane traveling through an airport, a girl singing, and there were originally 3 scenes, one after the other. And once I had to cut them in a John Gilroy way, they became, I felt, much more exciting, and the song strung it all together. And so now I just do that all the time. So, you know, at my age, I was still learning. John Gilroy's actually a little bit younger than me. I'm still learning stuff.
Every day's a school day, Col, and you've
It
taken
is. It really is. It really is.
Obviously, there is that incredible scene at the end with Darth Vader that is just mind blowing, and I think as every Star Wars fan,
that was
going,
Jabez's
wow.
idea. Jabez came into my cutting room one day, and he went, "I figured," because we're always trying to work out how to get more Darth Vader into the film, and Jabez came in and goes, "I figured out how to get Vader in." I was like, "Okay, pitch me," and he pitched this idea, and the way he pitched it was that Vader was going to fight his way onto the bridge, and it was going to be Radis on the ship that he was going to, where are the plans? And obviously it was simplified to being in the corridor for the reshoot, and then Gareth went off and filmed. It was the very last scene to be shot. Was Gareth filmed that shot in the corridor, and then John Gilroy was with another unit filming insert pickups, literally on the same sound stage. It was like, and I was just standing next to Peter Jackson watching all the fun, thinking.
And Peter Jackson was there, yeah.
When they shot the Vader scene, so that was Jabez's pitch, and I thought it was brilliant, and I told him it was brilliant, and then he said, "Okay, then I'm going to go and pitch it to Kathy Kennedy," which is what he did, and Kathy said, "Yep, let's do it." So
amazing, and it's one of those moments at the very end, when the plans are handed to Princess Leia, and you could literally press play on A New Hope on episode 4 when Rogue One ends, and they would segue perfectly into it.
Yes, the very first thing that we did. Even though we had all seen New Hope, I mean, I've probably seen it over 100 times. Gareth and I sat down at the cinema at Skywalker Ranch, which is George Lucas's cinema that they had built, and we watched New Hope, and then we started working on Rogue One. So that was our first day at work. Really, was sitting at the ranch watching that to get ourselves. This is we've got a legacy here, and we have. You can't be, what's the words that people say? It's the thing whereby you can't sort of overly worship and therefore make a bad product, make a bad film. But I think you have to be mindful of what the original film was and why we loved that film when we were kids. And Rogue is a much more adult film. I mean, Star Wars New Hope is definitely a kid's film. Empire Strikes Back is a darker kid's film. Return of the Jedi, I think, is more a kid's film again. It's lighter in touch than Empire. And Rogue is the darkest of those 4 films that conclude that one section of the, you go Rogue through to end of Return of the Jedi. Rogue is way darker, more adult film.
Yeah, it is. And but it really does set the tone. And I think as well, it gives it much more poignancy when you rewatch A New Hope now, knowing what they went through. That's right. And how the story.
When you read the crawler at the beginning of New Hope now, I mean, it's interesting because I actually had a crawler on the beginning of Rogue One when I did the very first cut of the film. I did a cut of the film using clips from other movies just to give us an idea of story and structure, and that's all it was. It was just a mood board, they would call it these days. And I put a crawler on, and then Gareth came in and he went, "Do you know what? I don't think we're going to do a crawler." And I was like, "Wow, wow!" Because every Star Wars thing up until then, TV series, the other movie, everything had a crawler.
We were expecting it as the audience.
Wow.
We were expecting it.
And then I think what was interesting was that genius piece of music that Michael Giacchino did, where he just did that note, because Michael's so clever. And when he put that on, you were like, this is going to work.
Yeah, and it does, and it really does. And I don't think it's any the lesser for not having a crawler.
Right.
But I also find it fascinating, Col, that all of that story comes from basically one line in the original crawler.
Yeah, and that was John Knoll. John Knoll, who was the inventor of Photoshop with his brother. Yeah. It was John Knoll's idea to go to Kathy and pitch that and say, why don't we make a movie of that opening crawler, of the plans?
And then let's just do it. Let's go from there. I have to ask, Col, with the success of Rogue One, and obviously you continue to be a fabulous editor, as we knew you would be, would you ever do another Star Wars?
If they'd asked me back... well, that's what was interesting, actually. They asked me to cut. John and Tony Gilroy asked me to edit Andor, the prequel to Rogue One, which I was going to do, and then unfortunately COVID came along, and I, because I was old, overweight, and very unhealthy, leaving the house without a vaccine was never going to end well, and so I decided I wouldn't leave my house. John and Tony both agreed with that, my reasoning. But as a consolation prize, Tony said, well, if you can't edit for us when you get a vaccine, I'd like you to guest star in an episode. So I am actually in the Andor TV series fleetingly. So I spent a day out on location. It was the first, once I had my vaccine and my COVID test, it was the first place I went after 14 months of being home, was to go onto set, onto Andor. And of course I felt really safe because I knew every single person there had been vaccinated and had a COVID test. So it was the perfect way to go back into the world. And I went back not into the real world, but into a world of stormtroopers.
Which is where you feel most comfortable.
A day on a mountainside, and I gave my best stern, rebel look to a bunch of stormtroopers as I walked past them.
As we knew,
it was great, and it was lovely, and it was lovely for Tony and John to ask me to do that. So yeah, I probably would.
Yeah, well, there we are. You heard it here first. Lucasfilm, come on, let's get Col back on the next movie or TV series. It's been a pleasure to talk to you, my friend. Thank you so much for sharing your insights into Rogue One, and may the Force be with you.
And may the Force be with you.